The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the producer and those appearing in this show and do not necessarily represent the views of DerryCam, the town of Derry, or any of its staff or affiliates.
Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass. We are on episode 20. This is the season 2 finale. We got here a lot quicker than I thought we would, but we're looking a lot better than we did in our first episodes. I'm really happy that the show's grown as much as it did, and that's all you. Thank you to the viewer. We wouldn't have got here without you. So anyway, we're here with our guest today, Chuck Morse, candidate for governor. So please take a minute to tell the audience about yourself.
Well, Anthony, I appreciate you inviting me over here. This is great. I think the easiest way to describe what I've done in the past is I've served two terms in the House, 8 terms in the Senate, and 2 days as governor. And during that process, I was the longest serving Senate president in the state's history, which was 8 years. And I did all that for $125 a year, but I loved every minute of it.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service to the state, possibly continued service, hopefully. So anyway, we'll get right into the topics today. And there's a few big ones that we discussed in the prior episodes, but we'll do it again today because they're still big. The Biden impeachment. We talked about this last week. The House will be back in session really soon. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's presenting articles of impeachment. And a lot of the senators and representatives have endorsed it. So what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, obviously, I've been in an impeachment process in New Hampshire. I think it was back in the late 90s. I believe there's a lot of respect that goes into that process in the House of Representatives. And we did that here in New Hampshire. They're going to do it in Washington. The fact that they served there and they made this decision to go forward with it, I respect that. And I think as they go forward with it, I think these things have a way of playing themselves out that'll benefit the public.
And obviously a lot of things have come out about the Biden family, some really not good things, particularly with Hunter, who was indicted on gun charges.
Yeah, I think we're on the federal side, the part that scares me, and it should scare every citizen in the country, our justice system nationally is just falling apart. I mean, we decide to, go after one person and not go after another person. The rules are made so that they are followed, and we're not following them. And I think in that particular case, it was pretty obvious they weren't followed.
Yeah, and regarding impeachment, and I mentioned this last episode, but the argument can be made that the Republicans in Congress are biased like the Democrats in Congress were during the 2 Trump impeachments. So I think that members on both sides do need to tread lightly, make sure everything's fair, because impeachment's serious. It's a serious thing, and it should only be used in really serious cases. It was used with Andrew Johnson when he was being drunk on the floor of the Senate, and they impeached him, and he only lost by 1 vote. 1 vote, and he would have been removed as president. And Bill Clinton was impeached for the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. Nixon was almost impeached before he resigned. So it's kind of weird that Trump was impeached for a phone call where he may or may not have said something, and then impeached for inciting a riot. So I think we need to make sure that what Biden's doing is something serious enough to where the Republicans can use it as good arguments and leverage to make sure we can do some damage to the Democrats.
Yeah, in my opinion, and I try to teach people this that come into the Senate every year, the whole process in government is honor and respect. And as the House goes through this nationally, I agree with what you just said. They need to go through it with that honor and respect and do their job. And I believe they will. And the facts will bring it to where it should bring it. And that's what those are all about. Impeachment's a serious thing, and it should be debated that way.
Yeah, and let's hope true justice is actually served. And yeah, 2024 will be really interesting, depending on which candidate gets the nomination. There's one likely, and that's Trump. Seems like he's almost definitely the front runner, but if you look at previous presidential elections, that can change really quickly.
Yeah, and we still have a lot of time in New Hampshire. You know, I do see the excitement in the Trump campaign on the road, but you see that excitement with a lot of other candidates, and as they're trying to get into New Hampshire and speak. And you know, you've probably been to as many as I've been to.
Yeah.
I'm going up to 4 or 5 times on the major candidates already, and that's a great thing. That's what this state's all about. So.
And speaking of that, on the first in the nation primary, not like I already know what your thoughts are, but what are your thoughts on the DNC trying to get rid of that?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely wrong. I mean, and out of respect for the state of New Hampshire and everything that the people in New Hampshire put into it, we have one of the highest attendances on voting in the country. And we have that because people pay attention to it, and I think that process should be respected greatly. I came out because just recently someone wanted to take someone off the ballot. That's not how we are in New Hampshire. We vote to make sure that we vote for a person that they want or they don't want, you know, on the ballot. And there shouldn't be decisions like that happening. And I really think the first in the nation, we're proving it again on the Republican side, that it's done right here. Candidates respect it. I think on the Democrat side, if you were to talk to the representatives in New Hampshire, you know, the national group is just plain wrong.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree. And when they voted on it in the House, in the New Hampshire House, there were 6 representatives that voted against the bill that would make it law in New Hampshire, including 1 Republican, which I find odd. But,
Yeah, that's kind of odd.
so, changing topics, the border. As you told me before we started filming, 4,000 people, is that right? 4,000 crossed the border just today. So.
Well, I actually flew there, and I took a bunch of sheriffs with me, and the area that they're showing on the news today where there's 4,000 people underneath the bridge, I was there. I was there when it was empty. This needs to stop for a lot of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, we need to take care of the people that are here. And, you know, they keep adding millions and millions and millions to that, which makes it more and more difficult. And now that you see the New York mayor actually speaking up, it's interesting, you know, that finally the Democrats are getting that we can't handle this as a country. The border needs to be shut. The wall needs to be built, right? Beyond that, I think what we're seeing throughout New Hampshire, they're able to make fentanyl so cheap, and it's coming through that porous border right now. And when I was there, we saw that. And that's affecting us here in New Hampshire. That needs to be shut down. I mean, our congressional delegation, the 2 senators, they need to get it stopped. And they should have to respond to that all the time when they come to the state and talk to the people.
A while back, I think it was a couple months ago, the idea to impeach Secretary Mayorkas came up. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, there's a lot of blame going on here. I think the fact is the border needs to be shut. It wasn't the Republicans that opened that border, and I think it needs to be shut, and then we have serious conversations about how we're going to handle the future. But you need to shut that border, and you need to shut down the cartels and shut down the drugs. And that's affecting every single state in the nation. So it's time. I saw the governors wrote a letter, I believe it was yesterday, that they're basically, it was 24, I think, Republican governors saying it needs to happen now. There needs to be an uprising from everybody in the country, you know, that's saying this, because it's not just Republican states that are facing these challenges, you know, so they all should be speaking up, and we need to end this.
And like you said, this impacts New Hampshire hard, especially because of our drug issues. We had the fentanyl talk at Pinkerton about how, you know, warning signs, stay away from it. And yeah, and I think drugs also tie into mental health. I've said it a ton of times on this show. The mental health crisis is the biggest crisis in America and the world. I think you can agree. I think that's Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Everyone can agree on that.
You know, and as we start to talk about my run for governor, I mean, I honestly believe I made some drastic changes in New Hampshire to start to address mental health in New Hampshire because I believe it is the problem that we should solve. And I think we've led on that, and I think we need to continue to lead on that. We bought a hospital not far from here in Hampstead, because we knew we had to start getting involved in providing services. So we're making headway. There's a lot more to do on mental health.
And on the northern border, what are your thoughts on the calls to shut down the northern border as well as the southern border?
Well, I think it's the whole state, east and west too. But on the northern border, I applaud the House and the Senate for coming together and putting $1.4 million in their budget just now to try and fight it up in the northern border. What it comes down to, though, the Republicans respect law enforcement. We need to lead on that because we don't have enough. We're 70 short in state troopers right now. That $1.4 million that was just put in the budget was to pay for overtime, to pay for more workers to be up on the border, to cover that 58 miles that we have up there, and to shut it down completely. We need to get to that, but we're only going to get to that if we respect law enforcement. You know, we need to pass bail reform in New Hampshire that works. We haven't been able to do that in 2 years, and I really think I need to go back as governor and get that done because it's important.
And switching topics, right before we get into your run, just a quick topic from yesterday. We had two very important elections yesterday, and we got one of them. There was the election for mayor of Manchester. We got our candidate into the general election in November, Jay Rouet. He won his. But unfortunately, in the special election for the House, Jim Gozofsky, who I will mention is a former guest of the show, lost to Hal Rafter, possibly giving the Dems the House. So what are your thoughts on the results of those two races?
Well, let me just talk about Jay first. The kid's dynamic. He works hard. He first came to me just when he was thinking about running. I supported him because the man has the energy to do what needs to happen in that city. You know, we're not from there, but let's face it. We all hear about the homelessness. We all hear about the increased drug use. We all hear about the increased crime. That is not a city that's headed in the right direction. Jay really is plugged into that. He's gone door to door to talk to the people, which is what you have to do here in New Hampshire. And he's going to make a great mayor in the city. And his showing yesterday just proves that he has what it takes.
And he got nearly 50% of the vote in a blue city, frankly, against three very liberal opponents.
Yeah, and then remember, there were 3 Democrats running, and Jay went out and proved a point. In almost every one of their districts, Jay won. I think he missed on just one of them.
Yeah, he won 11 of the 12 wards.
Yeah. So he hustled, and he went out there on values, which is what we're all about, right? And he ran on those, and I think he will make a big difference. And you know, he brings life back to the Republican Party in Manchester, and we need to get behind him.
And on Jim's election, what are your thoughts?
Well, Jim, you know, went in a real hard-fought area, and he came up short. I mean, we're seeing this in the House in special elections, and it shouldn't happen that way. You alluded to something that I think is very serious. That House is almost 50-50. And, you know, with the special elections that we seem to be having, we're losing those, and it's wrong. We should be winning on values alone. I mean, I strongly believe that we're on the right side of issues. We're cutting taxes, right? So we're driving the economy. We've paid attention to mental health. We've paid attention to disabled children. I mean, we're making sure that we're plugged in as Republicans, and the candidates that are running, we got to help them get across the finish line, and we didn't do it in that case.
And I think we have the majority by 1 seat right now, but there's going to be one more special election in downtown Nashua, which I think you know we don't have a chance at winning. So that will put it at, I believe, 199 to independent. So it's going to be 50-50, and it's going to be super hard for the House to pass much of anything in their second year of the term.
Yeah, it's not so much the passing things, I think in the House situation, it showed this year. I mean, we had parental
true,
rights
yeah.
on the floor, and the Democrats, took over the House floor that day because of attendance, and we lost a bill that I wrote originally, and I firmly believe we need to have in the state of New Hampshire. We want parents involved in education, right? We lost that this year on the floor. But you could see they worked together. They worked together on the budget. No committee or conference. I'm not sure that's all a great idea. I mean, I've been in many a committee or conference on the budget, and I'm not afraid to debate what I've worked on. But this year, one got passed, and it got a unanimous vote. So I think we can work together, Republicans and Democrats, but I really do think Republicans need to lead, and in these special elections, we need to show that we're doing that.
Yeah, and speaking of elections, you happen to be running in a very important one for next year. So start wherever you want. Floor is yours.
Well, the reason you invited me on this show wasn't because it was the last one of the season, and I can tell you that much. It's because I really do think that I add life to this process of running for governor, because I've served as Senate president for 8 years, and in those 8 years, we've done a lot of great things in New Hampshire that have made us the envy of the Northeast. Our economy is the envy of the Northeast. It's because we're cutting taxes and people are able to live here and grow their business here. And I think that's important. But along the way, as Republicans, we worked pretty hard to pass some pretty neat things that have made this state what it is right now. We passed constitutional carry. We're one of the safest states in the nation right now. We passed education freedom accounts. And, we're giving kids choices. I attend all these charter schools that I can go to. I went to one today again, a huge success story. Almost 400 children in that charter school right now over in Wyndham.
We have one in Derry.
And it's a big deal. When you're giving people the opportunity to choose their education, it's working, right? Well, we've passed this, and you've done a great job in the House and the Senate to raise the revenue number to a point where they can survive and run a good business model for their charter schools, and that's given all kinds of kids opportunity. And I think we need to just keep continuing to do things like that, but we need to lead in what we believe in.
So Sununu is retiring, which some people thought he wouldn't retire. Some people thought he'd run for president, and some people thought he would run for Senate 2 years ago. He didn't do that. So Sununu had kind of an aura around him, because whether we like it or not, New Hampshire is trending blue as of late. But Sununu, a Republican governor, was winning consistency by double digits every time. So is there a plan on your end to try to replicate a Republican winning in a blue trending state in the governor's seat?
Yeah, that plan's been going on for a long time. I mean, I think, when I went back to the Senate in 2010, 11, the state was in a heck of a lot of trouble. I was the finance chair in the Senate at the time. I worked with a pretty conservative leadership of the House. At the time, we had to cut $800 million from a budget, and that was a tough thing to do. But I did it, and I led on it, and I was able to convince people that it was the right thing to do. But what I saw during that time period was, our business taxes were 47th highest in the nation. Not a place New Hampshire should be, right? So we came up with a plan, and we implemented the plan, and we instituted it in small bites and got it to where we are today, and what a success story we are. I really do think that's the model that Republicans and Democrats want. Because if we're raising revenues, we're able to pay for things that Republicans and Democrats both want. And I only believe you're paying for things that are necessities from government, but we've done that. I mean, and I think it's working. And that's all because of this model that we built in this state. We need to continue to do it. Are there things we want to improve upon? Look, I can tell you, Anthony, I really believe we need to expand education. That's why I want to go back and fight for parental rights. I want to provide more in education freedom accounts. We have it at a certain cap right now. Every child should be able to participate in that. So as over the years, we're going to have to work to make that even better. Housing, listen, I think we can do a great job in housing, working with the communities that want to work with us as a state. And that's the model we should choose. We shouldn't be coming down and telling towns that don't want it. We should work with the towns that want it, and let's get it going. We're certainly doing that. We started that model when I was up there, but I think we work on infrastructure with the communities that want housing, and let's start to get enough housing so that we can satisfy what New Hampshire needs for growth.
So we talked about homelessness when we were talking about Manchester. Do you have any plans for homelessness?
Well, I think it first goes to mental illness. You hit the nail on the head when you started talking about that. I really do think that's where we have to pay attention in New Hampshire and start to work on that. You know, but you can't have the mentality that a city like Manchester has, that it's just all right. You know, they say they're doing something about it. Just go drive on the streets up there. You drive down the street. I was at a car show on Elm Street. I drove down the street and took a left, and as I'm driving on the main road, there's all these people that are in some form of a tent or another sleeping along the side of the road. I mean, we can't ignore this. You know, growing up as a kid, I mean, the churches were heavily involved in trying to help this. Now we realize there's so much mental illness involved and drugs involved. You know, we got to work to stop all this. And you can't just say, you know, let it happen in Manchester. It can't happen anywhere. We got to work to solve it. Yesterday, I met with a bunch of clergy to talk about what, I don't know if you remember this, but, you know, when George Bush was president, he thought the answer was to give a little bit to organizations and turn it into like an L-chip program, like we do with L-chip. Give $1, get $10 out of it. You know, we got to work to get that done. And that's only going to happen through leadership, and I think I give that leadership.
I'll give an example that I heard from a family member that lives in Massachusetts. The city they live in, there's a lot of homelessness. It's not Boston, it's a smaller city near there. And there's just a lot of like illegal immigrants and homeless people there, some with mental illness. And the city like took one of their abandoned hotels or something like that, and they just put everyone in there. So and they're not giving people that need like health insurance, like homeless veterans that are homeless for the wrong reasons, they're not giving them the attention. They're giving homeless illegal immigrants the attention.
Well, I mean, New Hampshire's very close on the homeless veterans issue, but there shouldn't be a homeless veteran. So we have to continue to make sure that that doesn't happen, but they are fighting hard on that issue. But I do believe there's more that can be done in this subject, and I think it's going to take all of us. You know, that's not a Republican-Democrat thing in society. And when I look at mental health, and I certainly have been involved as Senate President in a lot of cases where I've had to help people, we didn't have the resources. You know, I was dealing with Massachusetts hospitals and things to help get kids in that needed help. But, you know, this isn't just rich or poor families. It's everybody that's dealing with this. And we have to be there to make sure we create that safety net.
Yeah, and Massachusetts had a Republican governor for a long time, Charlie Baker, and he only retired to become president of the NCAA, which I thought was strange for a governor of Massachusetts to do, but, and Vermont's the same way. They have Phil Scott, he's a Republican. And Vermont is fairly safe also in a blue state like New Hampshire. So.
Yeah, but let's face it, New Hampshire's economy is the envy of the Northeast and probably the nation. And that's the biggest difference in all the states around us. We need to continue down that road to make sure that we are the envy and we have that economy. They're making it easy in Massachusetts when, you know, they're taxing people out of the state. We need to, in New Hampshire, pay attention to that and build the infrastructure that works for that. You know, a lot of people are working from home now, you know, so they can leave Massachusetts and they can come up here and work from their home. I mean, right away, that creates a tax savings for them to do that. So we need to promote that as a state, and we are. I mean, during COVID, many a Massachusetts resident bought up here in New Hampshire. We just need to make sure as Republicans we lead as Republican leadership in New Hampshire, and I think that's what I offer.
And southern New Hampshire has had a booming economy. Tuscan Village in Salem, where you live, perfect example of that. Like, when I was little, that was nothing. It was just an empty concrete field, and now it's shopping everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
I
pretty
mean,
cool
Joe,
to see.
he's done a great job, but he's not a developer. He's a man that basically had a vision, and he worked hard to do it. But, you know, I talked about infrastructure earlier to make sure we have housing and everything. We had to work on electricity in Salem. We had to work on water in Salem. I mean, those were all major issues that took years to do. You know, I offer that to the state. I worked on I-93 for 18 miles. 25 years I worked behind that project to make sure it got done, and now you're seeing the benefit of it right here because your legislators over here worked on 4A while I was
Yeah.
working on building and financing that project. And you know, that's going to benefit you in a big way over here in Derry. I think it's just great. But along the way, we worked with Derry and Manchester, and we brought water to the whole southern tier. And that was, you know, my committee that we worked pretty hard to build what we said we were going to build. And the future of water is enormous. I think we need to do all kinds of things in that category, but that's going to help to build some of these homes that we need to build.
All right, so we are almost out of time, so feel free to give a closing statement before we end.
Well, I just want you to know I've done it. I certainly believe that the way I've led in New Hampshire, I can come back to you and say, you know, I passed constitutional carry, and on the other end, I passed education freedom accounts. I've worked to make sure that charter schools are successful in New Hampshire. I want to go back and fight for parents' rights because I believe it's important to our state that parents are involved in their children's education. I ask for you to give me your support and come out and vote for me. I will make a difference in the state of New Hampshire with your help.
When is the Republican primary?
Well, I
Do you
got
know
a
yet?
year, so, you know, we got a lot of time to go out and talk to people. What I tell people when I go out is, look, invite me to that backyard cookout, and I'll talk to 10 people because I believe in it. I'm out there every day doing this. I appreciate you inviting me here, but I believe it's the way to talk to New Hampshire voters, and that's all voters. So I don't have a problem going out and talking about things.
Well, thank you for coming here, taking time out of your busy schedule to come to a rinky-dink show like mine. We're only in season 2. And yeah, this was the season finale. Like I said, I want to thank everyone for watching and getting us to where we are now. I want to thank the amazing crew here at DerryCam. I won't name names, but they're all awesome. I want to thank Kyle, Calvin, and Brady, our editors. They're not in the building right now, but they will be soon to edit the show. I can't edit for crap, so they have to do it for me, and they're the reason the show looks so good. And yeah, I'll be taking a break for a week or 2, maybe 3. Then we'll be back with season 3. So I'll see you guys soon. I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ass. Thank you for watching.
Congratulations.